Welcome to NewYorkBIOs Virtual Breakfast Series, a digital program started in 2020 bringing you fireside chats with leaders from across the healthcare spectrum. This week's episode features Rob Perez, operating partner at General Atlantic.
I'm very, very happy to welcome Rob Perez this morning. Rob Perez is an operating partner at General Atlantic, and we have a ton of things to cover. He was the founder of Life Science Cares, which is one of my absolute favorite organizations on the planet. He was the CEO of Cubist, which is in and of itself a great entrepreneurial story that I think has ramifications across the industry. And in general, we're just going to talk about career progression and a whole lot of other things. Before I forget, a little bit of housekeeping. If you have the time today, New York Bio is holding its emerging company showcase at the New York Stock Exchange. When I get a second, I am going to put the link to register for the virtual part of that in the chat. This is one of my favorite events that we have. We are fortunate enough to create it. I think in the first year that Jennifer and I worked together, the Stock Exchange has been a wonderful, wonderful partner. We've managed to host some terrific companies, and it's an event that I'm really, really proud to see has grown into something that's successful. So as soon as I find that, I'm going to put it in the chat. And for now, I'm going to say good morning to Rob Perez. Rob, it is wonderful to have you here. And I'm psyched for what we can talk about today. So as we kick off, we tend to lead with a little bit of an origin story. And why don't you tell us, why don't you just get us started? Why don't you tell us, wind the clock back, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are.
Sure. First of all, thanks, Derek. It's really, really a pleasure to be here. And thanks to New York Bio for doing this. This is a really cool way to get to know folks. So thank you for doing it. Well, first of all, hello to everybody. Thanks for starting the morning with us. I'm Rob Perez. I'm an operating partner at GA, where I work on the life sciences team. And if you want to start like origin story, it really starts in Los Angeles, which is where I'm from. I was born in Inglewood, California, a city outside of LA, and really fell into this industry. And one of the reasons I do what I do is I feel so blessed and lucky to have found this industry, and it's provided such an amazing journey. And it was really just by luck and happenstance. I went to a state school called Cal State LA, which educates kind of kids from the inner city. Had a typical Cal State LA story where I was, I worked my way through school for 5 years, worked going at night and working during the day, basically full time, and saw an ad for what was then Stewart Pharmaceuticals for a sales job, and it said $27,000 a year and a car, and I was like, that's me. I don't know what pharmaceuticals is, but that is me. And so the job was actually a sales job they essentially gerrymandered all the worst areas of LA, South Central, Watts, Compton, East LA. These are areas that I was from, I'm very comfortable with, and I was like, perfect. So I don't think they could find anybody else to take the territory, and I was like, the territory for me, so there was a match, and that's how I started, and had a fairly typical sales and marketing career at what was really precursors to now what is AstraZeneca, including a trip to Delaware to work in the home office there. And then I went to Biogen from Zeneca after 9 years at Zeneca, and was part of the kind of original team that commercialized Avonex, the first product for Biogen in MS, and started out west. And ultimately, after Biogen paid for business school at UCLA, after business school, the deal was they'll pay, but I got to come in. So I came to Boston to run the sales organization. Ultimately, I ran the US business at Biogen, and then moved on to Cubist, where I was chief commercial officer, president for a long time, and then CEO for like a minute and a half before Merck acquired us. And that's what got me into doing a bunch of different things, which I know we'll talk about, and ultimately landed me at GA, where I'm very proud to work with the life sciences team here.
Great. Well, you covered a ton there, and I think why don't we kind of start on career progression stuff, right? Because you literally, and it's funny, you hear about these stories sometimes where like you start in sales and it's kind of really the best way to get exposure in so many ways. And I think now it's odd. I think sales is painted in a strange light for folks now. I don't think younger people understand what it means to have a job or career in sales. I don't think they understand the advantages. Certainly to the startup crowd, it's almost like if you're doing sales, it's not transactions, it's not biz dev, it's not deals, right? So there's a less sexy aspect to that. But there are so many stories of folks that just work their way up from sales, because really that's the customer, right? That's where you actually get to things to see how the business runs.
Yes, I mean, I was really lucky. I was working in sales to work my way through school. So, and I was like working in fitness centers. So I was like the guy that walked you in the room and was saying, hey, why do you need to think about it? Give me that check today. So I was used to real sales, real closing. And when I got to the pharmaceuticals business where you weren't actually getting a check, I was like, oh, this is easy. I don't have to. But you do learn a ton. And I think the sales role is obviously a very people and influence role, and people and influence are part of every job. So getting good at those things is always going to be beneficial to a career. And the other piece is it leads you to management quickly. So I was able to manage a team at 25. And I always pray for those poor people who I managed at 25 because I was terrible. But I learned a ton, and you learn with real metrics. It's like I was an athlete. I was a basketball player, and being an athlete, you have the benefit of instant feedback. You're either winning, you're losing,
right,
scoring, you're not scoring. Sales kind of gives you that, where you don't get it in other careers. And even sales management, that if you're doing well and sales are doing well, you made some of the things that you're doing are working, or vice versa. If you're not, you learn that too, and you learn it pretty quickly. So you get a lot of reps, a lot of learning reps, and that's the beauty of that role.
Yep. Yep. So as you went up, what were some of the things in your career other than managing a team of ne'er-do-wells at 25, right? So what were some of the things that were kind of genuinely challenging as you stepped up things? And we could focus on Cubist if you want, because it's a really interesting story that I think wraps up a bunch of challenges that if we're not seeing them now, we probably will see them in the next 5 years commercially. Across the industry, not just, we're seeing them now in anti-infectives, but I think we're going to see a lot more of these kind of challenges on the commercial front.
Yeah, well, Cubist is a great place to look at kind of a commercialization story on lots of fronts. So first of all, for folks that don't know, Cubist was a company that worked on antibacterials for serious infections. So, and really, I think most would agree, was the last successful antibacterials company.
I was just running back through my head to see if there was another one that we could point to that had a good successful exit for everybody involved.
Yeah, and even at the time, the antibacterials, particularly hospital-based antibacterials model, was pretty much the domain of larger companies, larger pharma. And so Cubist was a little bit of a unicorn in that we were competing with one product essentially at the time, with a small team versus the Pfizers and Glaxos of the world. So it was a place that, for me, as a commercial leader, it really did allow for some lessons that kind of changed my perspective about the industry, and that is, how do you compete? What are the strengths that you uniquely bring to the table, and how do those compare to the folks that you're competing with? And I think at Cubist, we knew that we weren't going to outspend, we weren't going to have more resources, but we could be faster. And most importantly, we could learn faster. So our whole kind of business model was a commercial business model, that is, was around learning fast. So we had lots of kind of feedback loops between the people who were closest to the customer and management. We made sure that we were getting getting information on an almost daily basis and adjusting to that information and making changes, which led us to frankly focusing on, even though this was an IV only product, focusing on the outpatient opportunity, getting people out of the hospital. And Cubicin, our lead product, was very unique in that half of its sales were outside of the hospital. More than half of its sales were outside the hospital. That had never been done with an IV antibiotic that was basically thought to be a hospital product for serious infections. So we kind of changed the model, changed the messaging, all based on the feedback that we were getting and what we were hearing from customers and our sales team, frankly. And that's, I think part of the reason for success. Obviously, it was a tremendous product that helped a lot of people and saved a lot of lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there anything that, if we think about things today, is there anything that you think is particularly prescient from that experience where you can look at look at how crowded oncology is, or if you're somebody in a crowded field like gene therapy, right? It's, especially if there isn't that much differentiation between either the products or the new wave stuff that we're talking about, how do these companies actually compete? And it's not just against the bigger folks, right? I think the landscape is a lot more crowded.
I think the lesson, we spent a lot of time on culture. Culture was a big part of the Cubist story. Now I hear from all my friends who run companies and they have people from Cubist at their shops, and they always, kid me that, people talk about how great Cubist was. It's like, if I have to hear about how great Cubist was again, I'm going to throw up. Of course, those same people who are saying how great it was were on me because the phone in the conference room didn't work, right? So it's always better. The better the older I get, the better I was.
Yeah, wherever you were 10 years ago was the best, and nothing's ever going to touch that, regardless of where it was.
But I do think we had a differentiated culture. And here's the lesson. I speak about this often. Culture's one thing, and everybody has one, whether you know it or not. Most cultures are so average and milquetoast that they don't differentiate at all. Some cultures are fine, but they are different than the way that the company wants to compete. So what I believe is you have to have an alignment between your culture, how you want to compete, and how you're going to win. So for us, again, we were going to compete and win based on our ability to learn fast, and to be able to kind of get ideas from everywhere, make changes, and align quickly. If you have that type of culture, then you have to be very inclusive, right? You have to listen to people. You have to have a very kind of informal culture where, anybody can come up to the CEO and say, Rob, we got to do this differently. This isn't working, without fear of retribution. You also have to have a culture that says, if you fail, you're not going to lose your head if you're making a honest mistake. Right. We learn from failure. We actually, if not celebrate it, at least celebrate the opportunity to learn from it. That's a very different place than a lot of other cultures. So we kind of nurtured that because we knew that culture allowed for rapid learning, allowed for a growth mindset kind of organization, and therefore a way to win differentially. When those things are aligned, it's magic.
Do you have an element of what you do now at GA where you can actually spot that stuff? And do you think more about the internal, do you think more about culture from a GA standpoint, or when you and your team are looking at companies and thinking about what your next investment opportunity is, are you able to get a sense of that, or is it something that kind of has to be lived to be understood?
First of all, both. GA itself has a very unique culture for the growth equity or private equity space. I haven't worked at a number of companies, but from my friends and from what I understand, the culture at GA is much more collegial, much more focused on our portfolio companies and being a partner. And that's the kind of origin story of the firm. The firm started as a place that really wanted to partner with entrepreneurs. We don't have like a buyout mentality. Some firms are more geared towards, hey, we're going to come in, we're going to write you a big check, but then we kind of own the company and we're going to call the shots. That's not GA. We're more of most of our investments over the years have been minority stakes. So we're in the mode of let's sit down together and see how we can help the management team to do better. The second part of your question is, I definitely look for management teams that think about culture, alignment, and most importantly, how they're going to win. Right? I mean, there's certainly a lot of the investments that we make are relatively early, and a lot of it is technically driven in terms of whether we think the asset's going to work. But we've seen many times great management teams be able to pivot, grind, figure out ways to win, and those are the places that you really want to invest, because if in fact the science doesn't work out as you hope, then management has a way of making it still work in other areas. So those are things that we're looking at, particularly in our therapeutics investments.
Yeah, I'm resisting the urge to pivot right now, because frankly, this could be the most YouTube shared thing if we just spent the rest of the hour trashing the rest of the private equity field and telling us who kind of the worst people are. This would be tweeted into the universe, but we're not going to do that. So let's talk a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about after Cubis, right? So you know, Merck comes in, Merck buys Cubis, big deal, and so after that, you find yourself, you have a few board roles, et cetera. So talk a little bit about the, I don't know, I'll call it the post-merger search for the next thing, right? How do you approach that? What are the conversations? I imagine it's one of those things where your daily conversations are different than they ever were before, right? One minute your people are asking you how things are going with your company. They know you're under pressure with this deal. The next minute, well, this deal is done, and frankly, you now have free time because you have stuff to do. So what does that gray area feel like, and what are some of the things that you think about? And I guess you don't usually get to do it too many times in your career. So what are some of the things that period kind of taught you?
Yes. So I have a couple of lessons. I share this part of my life with a lot of people who are at this kind of crossroads after they have some sort of, so a couple of things that I share with others that this is kind of stuff that I wish somebody would have told me.
Yeah, totally.
So the first thing is you do get a lot of opportunities at that time. And I was kind of blown away with how many, board roles and just opportunities were coming at me. And I did have people who said to me, take some time. This is the first time in your life. I had never really even taken a more than a week-long vacation. Take some time. So I took like 10 days.
I was going to say, in my mind, I said, he's going to say 2 weeks.
Yeah, it took like 10 days. But the mistake I made was I told myself, well, I'm just going to listen. Right? I'm not going to really do anything. I'm just going to listen. But as soon as you make that call, one call begets another opportunity, begets diligence. And next thing you know, you're full time assessing all of these things. So I really didn't get much time off. And that's something that I would have definitely done different. Yeah. I say to everybody, take whatever amount of time, don't answer the phone. The world will be there for you when you get back. Trust me.
You didn't even finish reading The Hunger Games. You were done into something else.
We did one vacation in Turks and Caicos.
You came back and went to work.
We're back and went to work. So that's one thing I did wrong. The other thing I did wrong was I had a kind of framework that said, look, I'm only going to work with people that I like. I'm only going to do stuff with friends. And that was not the right thing to do.
Okay.
Because I got some great friends. They got some crappy businesses. I'm kidding. But I did some things.
You're not kidding. You're not kidding. You're absolutely not kidding.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I did some things that probably I shouldn't have done. And once you get in, it's really hard to extricate yourself when you decide, oh my gosh, there's a better fit for me, a better opportunity. You don't want to hurt friends. You don't want to. I would have been more discerning on what I jumped into, particularly for board roles. That was something that I probably did incorrectly, and that cost me some time and maybe even a little bit on my reputation because I got involved in companies I probably shouldn't have.
I think people don't understand I think people fundamentally don't understand that. I mean, it works almost similarly, I've talked to a bunch of people who they're board enrolled at big company X, and they feel like they want to go to a startup, right? And the first thing that I generally tell people is like, well, A, don't leave your job. And, B, like, what do you know about this company? Why are you going to this company? There's, your career decisions are really kind of binary decisions that you don't really get to take back. And the amount of time there's a time to get in, right? And then if you realize that you're in the wrong place, there's a time to get out. And doing that is very, very hard. And, ultimately, you said something like this before, but I think if you do that, you are also unlikely to be great in the position that you're in, right? And I think that's the part that people don't necessarily understand. Also, I think there's a lot of people that are kind of sold on the romantic notion of a startup, but the part that people don't get is that there's more than just like the top line on the resume that says you're going to go do this. There's a whole lot more that that however many days you're going to work there that are important. So this is so there's a couple of really good questions. I'll work this one in now. So the question here is, how do you choose a company culture, right? How do you choose something that's going to work for you? I'm adapting the question a little bit here. So if you were going to go back, and I get the working with your friends thing. I kind of have adapted it to people I like and want to work with, not just people that I'm friends with. So how do you actually think about the fit? How do you think about those positions a little differently?
Yeah, look, I think you have to kind of begin with the end in mind a little bit and think about what your life, what you want your life to look like, what and how many board roles and what types of positions you're looking at. I also think you have to look at your capabilities and ask yourself, can I really add value to this company? Because at the end of the day, again, I'm a commercial. I don't have a scientific background. If the company's too early, I can help on leadership and fundraising and culture and things like that. But at the end of the day, my expertise is going to be around preparing and ultimately commercializing the product. And so asking yourself, hey, if I only have a board slate of X amount of spots, how do I want to use them? And you really need to think about how many roles you want to take, and therefore be a little bit discerning. And I say that to people who have the benefit and again, blessing of a number of opportunities coming at them. There are still a lot of people who are searching for that first board role, and getting that first board role is super important. It opens up others. And so sometimes you have to kind of swallow a little bit because you have a role, it's a good fit, and you just got to get into being a board member. But if you have the opportunity of looking at multiple options, that's something that I think you need to do, is think about what you want your slate to look like overall.
Yeah, and I'm going to dwell on this for a second, because then when you don't have a lot of opportunities, you have to be almost more, it's very difficult to not have a lot of opportunities and have something that comes along that sounds good on paper, but isn't.
Yes.
And saying you have to really have the fortitude to say no to that.
Totally.
Right. Knowing somewhere that, you have to kind of believe that there's going to be another one out there for you somewhere, but you kind of have to have the fortitude to say no to the stuff that isn't going to fit you.
Yeah, very true. Both in terms of how much you like it, but also people are watching. They watch the decisions that you make. And so if you join a company that folks, kind of in hindsight say, wow, you should have seen that was really a bad company. It will impact how you're viewed for the next board role. And so those are very tough decisions. And I think, particularly for women, for people of color who are trying to break into a kind of board, process that is in many ways broken and very much insider driven, it can be really hard when you finally get one to say no. So I get that sometimes people have to roll the dice.
The other hard part too is that everybody's happy for you, right? Everybody's gonna, like, you can pick the absolute wrong thing for you, and people on the surface, they're gonna say that's great. They're gonna be thrilled for you or whatever, and you get this positive reinforcement, even if nobody really is like, "You really going to do that?" Like nobody says that. You say, "Oh, I'm thinking about taking this board role," and people are really excited. Or whether it's a role at a startup, people are psyched for you, and
Yeah.
that's it's hard to parse, or at least hard to have again, I guess, the will or the fortitude to say, yeah, I'm not really sure for XYZ reason, or to, keep it to yourself or say no, or however you do it. But saying no is hard because you have social pressure to say yes as well.
Absolutely. So I wanted to get back to the other part, the other lesson that we taught. So I talked about some of the tactical decisions. The other lesson that I really want to say to the audience, because it was a significant kind of driver in my life post-Cubist, but even a driver in my life leading up to that position, was asking yourself and asking myself, what makes me happy? So let me rewind that a little bit and give some backdrop. So I, like many of the people who are on the webinar, am kind of wired for achievement. So, I chase the carrot. You put the carrot out there, I chase it. That's just kind of, click whir response. That's what I do. And that's the way my whole life had been driven. As I got into my 40s and had, kind of exceeded my wildest expectations of, growing up in Los Angeles and going to a state school and thinking that I was going to have a certain life, and, exceeded that expectation. Each additional achievement that I got and worked very hard for, I was surprised at how little happiness was on the other side of that achievement. Each time I just kind of came up with the next achievement and moved the goalpost, and off I went. And there wasn't really each time I got a little bit more concerned, and you can even use the word depressed, because what I thought I was working towards that was going to give me happiness wasn't there. And so as I was advancing at Cubist, and frankly, in the succession process to be CEO, this was starting to come to a head. And so much so that when the board kind of tapped me on the shoulder to say, okay, it's time for the succession and the change in CEO leadership, my answer was, I'm not sure I want to do it. And for those of you out there, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
When there's been a whole succession process kind of gained for you to take on this role, and folks say that they were ready to do it, it's not a good time to.
Right. No.
But
you can go from first place to ninth place really quickly.
Really quickly. Yeah. But I was so lucky because in Mike Bonney, I had a friend and a leader who believed in me and kind of got me. We knew each other, have known each other very well, very long, and a board that really cared. And they invested in me to try to figure out what was going on. They spent time and money to help me to frankly get some help on how I was thinking about things. And I had some incorrect assumptions about being a CEO and what it was going to take. And even though I had been president for a long, long time, but basically it was a mental wiring issue. And so I was able to get it worked out. For example,
what did you do? What did they do? Yeah. How did this happen?
Yeah. So to give you an example, I knew that that the things that made me happiest, the days that I was happiest, were when I was involved in community service. Cubist, generally, and me personally, was kind of highly involved in the community, even in that role. And those were great days for me. I was super happy when I was talking to kids, or I was on a couple of nonprofit boards that really made me happy. So those were things that I was like, gosh, maybe that's what I should be doing. Maybe that's where my life is heading, because the more I achieve on the corporate side, it's like blah. And when I do that, I'm blissfully happy. And I started to have this framework that said it's got to be one or the other, and was thinking about making the choice. And what I learned was it didn't need to be one or the other. And frankly, as CEO, I could do a lot for the community and do a lot, frankly, even do a lot more by having that role and having that platform. So that's one example. But I worked with Korn Ferry through a lot of resources that they had, both coaching, corporate coaching, as well as just frankly some mental health resources that helped me to kind of think through where I was and what I wanted. Also, they did a lot of studying of my leadership style and the way that I lead, which is a little different than most of the folks they studied. So after that, I came out of it extraordinarily confident that the CEO role was right for me and that I was going to be good at it. It worked out, but it did kind of spark something on the happiness front for me that I needed to figure out. So I went on kind of a pretty significant journey to figure out happiness, what makes me happy, generally what makes people happy. Spent a lot of time, read a lot of books and papers on happiness. So when Cubist ended, I really stopped and was able to ask that question. Everybody said to me, everybody in my corporate world, in my personal life, well, you're going to go run another company. You were a CEO for like a super short time. And you have a lot of offers, you're kind of a hot commodity in the space now. So obviously you're going to go run another company. And so there was somewhat a lot of pressure to just get back on the treadmill and do that. But because of this experience before, I really stopped and tried to spend some time thinking about what made me happy, and ultimately landed on a philosophy that I want to have an optimized life, not a maximized life. And what I mean by that is I want to take a few things in my life and try to get the optimum amount of that, even though I'm going to have to give up on some, as opposed to just maximizing career or maximizing family or other things. So I picked up things and said, how do I get this in the right balance? And essentially went with that. So that's what led me to, instead of being a CEO and going all in on the next CEO role, of doing the advising thing of Life Science Cares, frankly, which was a big part of what I wanted to do.
Yeah, we're going to get there.
So that was my journey. But I say that to people, it's a long-winded story, but to say, whether you're at a crossroads or not, it's super important for people to unplug for a second and ask themselves the very honest question of what makes me happy, not what's supposed to make me happy,
right?
What people think I should be happy with, but what really makes me happy. And then I think start to deal with that. Dealing with that is the hardest part. But it was a big lesson for me, and one that I try to share with others.
I think it's a super important point, because I think I don't think we're hardwired for this necessarily, but there are, industry assumptions on what the next step in someone's career should be, because we attach equity, salary, prestige, whatever it is, we attach all of those things to certain types of careers or certain career moves. And we assume that's what everybody wants because it sounds great in the press release. Yeah. Right? You look at someone who you don't know, who is on the internet with list of accomplishments, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it looks like the archetype of what you either want to achieve or what you're supposed to achieve. And I like what you said before, where, even when you get it, it feels, you can move the goalposts again. I mean, this is funny in a different way, but if you talk to any academic professor, the minute after they get tenure and you ask them if their happiness has changed, it's never yes. It's all the same stuff. None of the other stuff goes away. And we were talking about this before. I think when people are doing the things that make them happy, I think they're better at what they do. I think it's this self-reinforcing thing where, if you are lucky enough to be in a position where you're the best version of yourself, I think that has, kind of compounding benefits in a lot of ways.
100%. And, I talk about this a lot to particularly young people of color, to young women, people who are on their way up and who are different in the work environment for one reason or another. And for a lot of them, when you're young, it's hard to be different, right? You're trying to fit in, and you're trying to be what you see is successful. But if what you see is not who you are, you're never going to be as great as you can be, because it takes a ton of energy to try to be someone who you're not. So really being able to lean into your authentic self and figure out where your authentic self strengths are and how being that person can be leveraged towards success. That's when it really hums. But I see a lot of people who try the opposite, and it's really challenging. And I did that too when I was young. I guess a lot of people.
I know. So this is an important point. This wasn't in our pre-stuff, but I actually want to spend a minute here because we have an industry that is not as diverse as it could be. We are not great at developing a pipeline of diverse talent. And honestly, we need to be better. And I think it's not only incumbent on, the folks who are, basically trying to make their careers, but I think it's incumbent upon folks who are in leadership positions to understand that and provide kind of the right amount of guidance so that we do end up with, a more diverse and a more representative and really a industry that delivers better quality for a lot of different kinds of people rather than, what we have now.
Yes. And for the purpose of more innovation and better results, because ultimately attracting more talent and bringing new ideas to our industry and from different places is ultimately going to lead to better results. And there's certainly a moral equity part of this, but I, in my bones, believe that if we do this better, we're going to produce more. It's in our business interest, and ultimately in the interest of our patients and the patients we serve. So I 100% believe that. And I speak about diversity often, whenever I do, I always use this saying that really resonates for me, and it's every system is perfectly designed to produce the results it's producing. So the system that we have in place for attracting talent is producing the results it's producing. It's not going to change. You can want it to change. You can really want it passionately. But unless you're willing to break that system or create some new systems, it's going to continue to churn out exactly what it's been churning out in the past. And so I think for leaders, what we have to do is think about new systems. We have to think about new ways of doing things to attract talent. We have to think about new ways of advancing talent and mentoring talent. And that's how you ultimately end up with a different result.
Yeah. Just as an aside, it's not clear to me how you've not been put on stage with a TED Talk yet. I mean, honestly, I think we've probably covered like 3 of those now. And frankly, we're going to pivot to Life Science Cares. And this is basically Wheel of TED Talks this morning. So let's actually get to Life Science Cares, because it's an absolutely fantastic organization. It's grown to multiple cities. I'm thrilled that we have a chapter here in New York. But I want you to wind the clock back and tell us how you started Life Science Cares and give a little bit of history about how it's grown up to what it is now. It's one of my favorite things in the industry.
Thank you so much. I'm going to put a little warning out. This is a little corny, but it's true. Trust me, it is 100% true. So if you wind it back again, coming out of Cubist, I was involved a lot in the community. I really thought, okay, I want to add more service to what I do and how I impact the world. Remember, backstory, I'm the lucky kid from Inglewood that somehow the cosmos aligned and I got to live this life. So I do feel some sense of urgency to give back. So I went around and talked to a lot of people in Boston about trying to do something similar to the Robin Hood Foundation, which you have in New York here, and one of the best and biggest poverty fighting organizations in the world. And I wanted to see what we could do about bringing a Robin Hood model to Boston. So I went and I talked to a bunch of people who, not in life sciences, but people who are involved in philanthropy in Boston. And I heard from them why it wouldn't work in Boston. different reasons.
Those conversations. Not going to work here.
They all said the same thing. It's not going to work. But the other thing that they said was, hey, where are you guys in the life sciences industry? All I see is like, this company is doing great. The industry is booming in Massachusetts. This CEO is making this much money, but I don't see you guys involved in the issues of the city. like I do other industries that have been, active in Boston for a long time. And I thought about that and said, well, it's a little unfair because our industry is so kind of spread out. It's kind of an inch deep and a mile wide for the most part. We have a few large companies I'm talking about Boston now, a few large companies, but most of the companies are not profitable. If they're involved at all, if they have any resources to be involved, they're usually involved in the therapeutic area in which they're working. And the large companies are very philanthropic, the Vertexes, the Biogens, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So I kind of thought about that. And one night, I don't sleep that well. Sometimes I have a hard time turning off my brain. And one night I wasn't sleeping and Life Science Cares hit me like a lightning bolt. And I mean, hit me like 80% of what Life Science Cares is today. I got up that night and wrote down in a deck because I couldn't sleep and I was so like pumped up about it. The name, the model, the board of advisors, everything. So much so that I woke my wife up. I was like, hey, I'm going to end poverty. She's like, yeah.
Good to hear, honey. Yeah.
Last week we were going to fly cars, right?
Good stuff, honey. Good luck with that. That'll be great.
Yeah. So literally that's what happened. I ended up kind of refining that deck and putting it together. And then was about ready to email it to a bunch of leaders in Boston. And that was probably the most terrifying part because, look, again, I was a CEO for a super short time. I was not like the center of the industry. I was nowhere near the top of the totem pole within Boston Life Sciences. So I didn't know whether people are going to say, Rob, who is this guy? And what does he want to do? And why does he want me involved? But I sent the deck to a whole bunch of leaders. And I just got back immediately. I'm in. What can I do? How can I help? It was really, really humbling to see the support from the industry, including people like Bob Coughlin, who ran Mass Bio at the time. And Bob got behind it because he realized that this is something that he felt like the industry needed to do and he could help with it. George Skangos was the CEO of Biogen. And I went to George and Jeff Leiden, who ran Vertex at the time, individually to say to them, look, I need you guys more than you need me. You guys already have this kind of effort. There may even be some double dipping, but I really need your help. And they said, we're in, you got it. So that's how it started. I do think here I should take 2 minutes to just explain what Life Science Cares is for some folks who might not know. So Life Science Cares is essentially a way for the industry to give back collectively and to impact poverty in the major biopharma hubs in the US. So what we do is we aggregate resources, both human and financial, with an emphasis on human resources from our industry. And we deploy those resources through the best nonprofits working in 3 areas of poverty fighting. One is basic human survival, access to basic needs, things like hunger, homelessness, health equity, those kinds of things. The second is education. And the third is access to economic opportunity. So organizations that do work in job creation, job training, et cetera. So we find the best nonprofits in those areas and we sit down with them and talk about how our industry and our resources can help them to do what they do bigger and better, more effectively, more efficiently, et cetera. We do that. We started in Boston 7 years ago. As I said, and we now are in 5 different cities: Boston, Philadelphia, San Diego, San Francisco, and our newest chapter in New York City, which is off to a great start. And we've also added our own content over the years. So now we have our own internship program called Project On-Ramp, which is going on right now as we speak, for students who are impacted by poverty, all of whom are Pell Grant eligible, so all of whom are living at or below the poverty line, most of whom are students of color. And we provide the first, for many of them, for almost all of them, the first paid internship opportunity in the life sciences field. So we're going to do this summer, we'll have right about 300 interns getting their first paid internship in life science companies in those biopharma hubs. And we're going to 1,000 over the next 5 years, 1,000 kids a year who are going to get that opportunity. That's a system breaker. That's a way to get a new look at our workforce. So that's what we do at Life Science Cares. And that's generally an overview of the organization.
Okay. Well, that's fantastic. I mean, I remember, I think it was it last year at the stock exchange when Liz Fassberg stepped on as managing director of New York and announced this. And I think I thought about this a lot. I mean, we work in an industry that broadly tries to impact healthcare in a lot of different ways. We take these crazy scientific risks and we do things that ultimately are going to benefit patients. And our industry is really filled by people that care about that. And it doesn't. I think it goes beyond the molecule, right? We care a heck of a lot more about where the molecule goes and who it helps than just for the scientific intrigue. And you can't be in this industry and not realize that there's more things than the drug that impact patients and people's lives, right? In a lot of ways, your zip code has just as much, if not much more, impact than whatever therapeutics you end up being on. And I think you've just energized this really kind of great core group of people we have in our industry to extend them a little bit, right? You talked before, about stuff that makes you happy, stuff that gives you energy, stuff that you do it and you feel good by the end of the day. And I think you've tapped into something here that our industry really wants to see and enjoys seeing tangible benefits of what they do on a daily basis and who they're working with on a daily basis.
Absolutely. We're a vehicle for people to care. And our industry is full of passionate people that care about humanity. That's why folks are in this industry. But for many of them, the fruits of their labor aren't going to show up for decades, right? And so this is a way to have some channel in their life towards caring today for somebody that they can see, they can touch, they can feel. And so what we try to do is to provide the easiest vehicle for them to do that, either individually or as a company or as a function or team. We have lots of ways for people to get involved and get back. And almost any given day, there's something going on somewhere. And if you're on LinkedIn, I'll apologize because you probably see the pictures.
Oh, you're going to get them, and they're great. So
but we're always doing something.
How do you think about? I mean, you've expanded. You're now in, Boston, the Bay Area, New York, Philadelphia, San Diego, all biotech hubs in their own right.
Yep.
How did you think about expanding? Right? I imagine it's not cookie cutter. I imagine there are kind of local considerations of each one. So how do you think about what it means to go to someplace new? How did you think about what it meant to come to New York?
Yeah, it's always driven by the local leaders, frankly. We get outreach all the time from folks who say, hey, I want to bring it to this city or that city. But it really does take a collection of leaders that have the juice, if you will, to bring others into this. So someone needs to be able to send out that first deck like I did and say, hey, what do you think? What do you think about doing this here? One of the parts of the model is that the leadership of the local area kind of funds the effort. So
right.
In each area, we have a board of advisors and board of directors. In Boston, there's 200 board of advisors, all of whom are doing 4 things. They're helping us. In the beginning, it was really important that we had their name because these were very prominent people to show people that this was real. It's less important now, but still important. The second thing is there are champions within their company or firm. They're the ones we go to say, hey, we're having a fundraiser, we need volunteers, etc. The third thing is they often are the ones who tell us or suggest which nonprofits to work with. They don't make the decision, the board of directors makes the decision, but they nominate nonprofits that could be good partners for us. And the fourth thing, and importantly, is they provide a financial donation personally every year. So Life Science Cares is funded by the leadership, the C-suite leaders of the industry. They're the ones who, for the most part, are paying for the staff costs and the cost of doing this, so that when we do fundraising and we do bring in money from companies or philanthropic individuals, that can be almost all passed along to our nonprofit partners or to our programming, our local programming. So it takes those leaders to step up and say, I'm going to support this personally, and I'm going to recruit others to support personally. So when you have, in San Francisco was Ted Love and George Skangos, and San Diego was Tom Daniel and Rich Heyman, for example, and in Philadelphia, Vin Milano and Jeff Marazzo. So it takes, and here in New York, Jonathan Fassberg, who knows everybody, kind of started to bring different people in. So it really does take that kind of person who's connected enough to bring others in, and that's how you get it going.
There's also that piece where they're not just there because their company writes a check, right? It's not the same. They're there because they're writing the check and they're in, and that's also a little bit of power to say, well, listen, I'm asking you to do this. I'm already in.
Exactly.
Right? There's actually a big solidarity there.
Exactly. It's a big part of it, and a kind of a unique aspect of the way that we built this. But I thought it was really important for people to be committed and be owners of this. I mean, this isn't my organization. It is our collective organization. Everyone is putting their own, blood, sweat, and tears and treasure into this to make it happen. And that's why I think people have such kind of an affiliation and an ownership of it, because everyone is pitching in to make it happen.
I mean, it's nice that it's visible too. I remember, I think the first time I heard of the organization was because of something that was happening at JP Morgan, right? And, you do an excellent job of getting things out there on social media and making it visible, but you're also doing a lot of things that are visible in the places that other, folks in the industry are, right? Whether it's, I don't know if you did anything at Bio, but you do things at JP Morgan, you do things in and around the rest of the industry that, the industry is there, they see them. And I think a lot of people say, I want to get involved in this.
Yes, we try at every large meeting to have some service event. Even if it's a small way, people putting backpacks together for students, helping. We've had food rescue organizations at JP Morgan.
Soup kitchen stuff, yep.
Yeah, so food wouldn't get thrown away that are in the conference rooms of these meetings. So just some way of reminding us that, there are people, we're walking over people to get to our meetings. Let's stay connected to what the industry is. So one quick commercial for the audience. If you're interested in Life Science Cares and you're intrigued, we'd love to have you be a part of it. And if you're a C-suite leader and you're interested in the board of advisors, which is what I just talked about, we definitely need more advisors. If you're not a C-suite leader and you maybe writing a check isn't kind of for you right now, we have other ways of getting involved. We have it's called the Council of Champions, and folks who are more mid-career and people who are often contributing with their time and with their effort as more than their money. And so you can ping me on LinkedIn, let me know who you are, and I'll get you connected with either Liz in New York, or if there's others outside of New York, I'm happy to do that as well.
Okay. This is so thank you for that. I think that's great. I put the Life Science Cares website in the chat. And Liz Fassberg does stuff in New York. For anybody that's local, I can connect you to her very easily. We got a question from Katie McCarthy, who is one of my absolute favorite people on the planet. She says nice things about us, and then she says, what's the biggest pivot that you've had to make with Life Science Cares throughout the years, and has anything really surprised you?
Yeah, we're in the midst of it now, because we now have operations in all these sites. We have not had a national infrastructure. Everything was done locally, and we just tried to coordinate and be collegial. And that's worked until it hasn't. We're now too big in that we have a lot of companies that we work with that have multiple sites. We even have some nonprofits that have multiple sites, and they want to deal with us in one way. So we're now in the midst of having a national infrastructure, if you will. Sarah McDonald, who ran the Boston chapter brilliantly for 7 years, is stepping up to be the president of Life Science Cares National. So she'll be over the whole thing. And we're figuring out now what we need to keep local. And most of it is that the magic in Life Science Cares is local. So the fundraising will be local. The decisions on which organizations to work with is local. The decision on how much money to give out is local. But how we operate has got to be a little bit more coordinated. So we're in the process of doing that now. We have a national kind of management committee with representatives of all of the sites coming together to work as a whole on Life Science Cares broadly. So we're just getting that started. It is complex. It's not unlike running a business that is growing really fast, and there's a lot of benefits to it, but a lot of challenges. And so we're working through that now.
Okay. All right. So we've got about 4 minutes left. We kind of just did our big question. What's happening with Life Science Cares? I would ask you where it's going to be in the next 5 years, but you're just establishing this national framework, and I imagine it's going to be, bigger and better and things. So I'm going to pivot a little bit, and I want to take it back to kind of the mid-career happiness piece. And I want you to assume that you have a group of kind of mid-career folks who are, ascending in their careers. And what would you say to them about the steps that they're going to take in the next 5 years that you think are going to be impactful?
Yeah. Again, getting back to, I'm going to repeat myself a little bit, but I think there are a couple things. One is authenticity. That mid-career point is where you really have to I think, lean into who you really are, because you can fake it when you're younger. You can fake it when you're lower in your career, but as you get mid and to the more senior positions, which are tougher, you really have to be, let's just say it takes a ton of energy to try to be good at something where you're really not being your authentic self. So that's the first point that I would make is, are you in the right place? Are you in the right place, both in a company place, but also in a role? And then the second is, how do you know that? Well, you know that because you're happy doing it. You're happy with yourself. You're happy with who you are when you show up to work. You're happy with how you impact others around you and how you impact the world, et cetera. So that authenticity, I think, is the biggest lesson that I had to learn. And when I leaned into it, the world changed for me. My career sped up like crazy. I was in a world where I was trying to be other people that were very, very different from me, very, very different from how I was brought up, very, very different from my environment growing up. And it was super hard and terribly taxing from an energy perspective.
Yeah.
So that's the place that I would start with people is, are you in the right spot? Do you feel like this fits perfectly, or is it too tight or too loose? Find your fit, and then once you do, off you go.
Yeah, I would also say that if you're in a place that doesn't fit, find people to talk to. Like, there's always folks that are allies. Mental health is health. Don't do it because you think you're pleasing somebody else, but actually take care of yourself. And I think you'll find that there are more people who are willing to listen than you think there are.
Exactly. Especially for people who are different, and everyone defines different personally. But if you feel like you're one of the only, or you feel different in an environment because of ethnicity, because of education, because of sexual orientation, whatever that thing is, it takes a lot to be different, right? It takes a lot of energy. You're constantly saying, what if I answer it this way? How's it going to land? Who's going to be thinking about it? All of that is really, really challenging. So you got to figure out what makes your authentic self happy. Otherwise, it will kind of tear you up over time.
Yeah. Rob, this has been fantastic. We are out of time. You've been an absolutely wonderful guest. I can't thank you enough for joining us today. To everybody else, I hope you have a fantastic day. Next week is July 4th. We are off. I am going to be on the sunny shores of Aruba. Nice. So yeah, it's going to be pretty sweet. I hope everybody has a great day. Rob, thank you so much.
Thanks,
and I hope all of you can join us at the Stock Exchange this afternoon. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.